Hey, what's up? Hope you're having a fantastic day and welcome back to another video. Now today we are going to be taking another look at the brand new PRS SE Hollow Body 2 Piezo Edition. I've been really enjoying this guitar that I received literally just a few days ago. If you want to see my unboxing video and an overview of what the product can do, then check out my Out the Box episode over here. But today we are actually going to be comparing a PRS SE Edition to a top tier PRS guitar. So we'll be taking a look at my PRS wood library, which was about over £3,000, and we're going to be comparing it to this PRS, which is just over £1,000, and we're going to see which one is actually better and whether it is worth spending the extra money on a higher spec PRS. And I think you're going to be surprised by the outcome of today's video. So this right here is my PRS Custom 24 10 top wood library. Seriously, these names are so confusing. Basically, it's a super fancy PRS with the fancy top. It's got 24 frets and it's super high spec. Now, I got this for my 18th birthday about 2 years ago, and I honestly absolutely love this guitar. I got it just after I went and seen Joe Bonamassa shredding it up, and then I went to a guitar store to celebrate my birthday, got this bad boy of a guitar. Absolutely beautiful, and I have loved using this guitar. It was my primary guitar since last year when I actually switched back to a Gibson. Now, we had a video where I talked about why I got a lot of hate during that video, but it doesn't mean I don't like PRS guitars. I've literally just bought another PRS guitar. So today I actually want to talk about the specification of this guitar versus the specification of the cheaper version. Now, both guitars, interestingly, have pretty much the exact same pickup. So in this PRS here, I'm running the 5815 LT pickups. Now, the LT stands for low turn, which means they're not as hot as the standard versions. However, in the SE, it came with the 5815 S's. Now, the S's mean they were made in the Korea factory because obviously the SE guitars are not made in America, whereas the wood library, more fancy ones, those are made in the USA factory, and they've got the better wiring inside of the actual guitars. Now, another specification that surprised me on my brand new SE was the fact its fretboard was ebony. Now, the fretboard on this fancy PRS over here is also an ebony fretboard, and the other wood specifications on the two guitars aren't too dissimilar. Now, on both guitars, we have a mahogany neck and also a mahogany sides on both the wood library and also the SE. The only difference between the two guitars is on the wood library, we have a solid maple top. However, on the PRS SE, we have a laminate 5-ply veneer maple top and maple back. So it's not real maple, it's man-made maple because it's a laminate. So theoretically, we should get better sustain out of the PRS wood library because it's using real, natural, high-quality wood. Another beautiful thing about the fact that this is made in the American factory with real maple is you can see it has the flamed maple finish on the top of the guitar body, which is absolutely stunning. However, on the SE, we still have a beautiful finish on the top of the guitar, but it isn't that flamed maple that you get on the 10-top PRSs. Now, although on paper the woods are identical, obviously the PRS one is going to have better spec wood than the SE because obviously the SE is going to have cheaper fabric parts because obviously they want to make it for less to sell it for less. And the way you can actually tell this is with the fretboard. Now, although both of them are ebony fretboards, you can clearly tell there is a distinct difference between the darkness of the ebony on this guitar and also the darkness of the ebony fretboard on the SE. Both ebony fretboards feel pretty good, but the one on the wood library does feel thicker because if you take a look on the SE, it has this beautiful maple binding all the way up the side of the guitar. Now, in my honest opinion, I think they put this on the guitar to actually hide the fact that the ebony fretboard isn't actually as thick as it looks. You know, they've said it's an ebony fretboard, but how thick is the actual fretboard before it goes to some form of a cheaper wood in order to cut costs on the guitar? Because if you take a look on the PRS wood library, you can see there's no form of a binding on the neck of the guitar, and you can clearly see how thick the ebony wood is on the fretboard before it goes to the mahogany neck. It's a super smooth transition, and they've really, really cleaned it up to almost where it looks seamless between the two woods changing. However, obviously on the SE, there's this huge binding which kind of discloses where the ebony fretboard actually finishes. So one would assume the ebony fretboard isn't as thick as the one on this guitar because they would obviously want to show that off. Now on the subject of the frets, let's talk about the bird inlays on the fretboard. Now on the PRS wood library, we have actual pearl inlays on the fretboard, which just makes it such a higher finish, and it looks super flashy when you catch it on the light. It looks absolutely beautiful. However, on the SE behind me here, we have the old school bird style inlays. So they're not actually pearls like on the custom versions. They're more of a cheaper spec, but to be honest, they look pretty much identical. Like if someone's watching you play on stage, they're not going to be like, his birds don't look as good as the guy with the more expensive PRS. They both catch the light identical. And to be honest, there's hardly any difference between the two. So to demonstrate these two guitars in action, I have set up two different guitar rigs so you can see the two extremes of the spectrum. So on the first rig, we are running the Supro 1690T amplifier. This will give you a great indication of how the guitars perform in a clean amp. And then also I have got a distortion pedal plugged into the amplifier so you can see how it would respond with pedals. I've also got a more modern amplifier set up with a Blackstar 40 watt, and we're going to be using the overdrive built in to the amplifier so you can see how the two guitars perform plugged straight in to an amp, rocking the overdrive channel. Now, if we take a listen to the two guitars clean, just running straight into the Supro amp without any overdrive on, it's literally just going straight into the amp at a half decent level, so it's a super clean setup. Now, if we take a listen to the PRS SE, the overall tone sounds slightly thinner. It's a super crispy, chimey tone, and it's got a lot of fidelity and clarity, but it is quite thin, especially on the treble pickup. Whereas if we take a listen to the PRS wood library, the overall tone is very thick. It's a very, very thick body tone. Now, this might not necessarily be down to the actual pickups. This might actually be down to the types of guitars we are running, because obviously the PRS SE is a hollow body, so it's not a solid guitar. There's literally no wood inside of the actual body of the guitar. It's just full of air, which will obviously help give you that lighter sound. Whereas with the PRS wood library, that is obviously a solid body guitar, which is inevitably going to give you a much darker tone. And also the fact that it's solid maple, the actual guitar top, that's also going to add to the more woodiness to the overall sound. I really do like the PRS wood library when it is running clean, like especially just doing like sort of solo acoustic-esque guitar playing. I like the fact that it sounds really thick with a huge body behind it. But in a practical situation, I always find that the PRS wood library always just sounds too thick. It's just too body. It's got too much body to the sound, which means it struggles to find its place in the mix when you're actually performing with a band. It sounds fantastic in isolation, but when you put it on a stage or in a studio song, it starts to really struggle to find its place within the mix. However, with the PRS SE, the fact that it has less low end to it and less like muddy MIDI tones, it has more of a lighter sound. I feel like that'll give you a lot more versatility when using it in a variety of different situations. Now in the next setup, we're going to be running the exact same Supro 1690T amp setup. Exact same tone, same volume, nothing has changed on the preamps, but this time we're gonna run a distortion pedal into the front of the amp, and we're gonna be using the Crazy Tube Circuits Black Magic. I love this distortion pedal. It's a very cool tone. Now what I want you to listen out for in this demo is basically the clarity of the two pickups when distortion is applied, the total dynamic range of the pickups and the fidelity of the audio coming out of each guitar. And also I'm going to demonstrate the roll-off of the guitars, and what I mean by the roll-off is basically where we have the pickups at 10, so they're at full load, and then we roll them back just to reduce how hot they are to then clean up the amp. This is a very versatile technique that a lot of guitarists use to basically switch from a clean guitar tone to an overdriven guitar tone just by riding the volume knob. So what you will have heard in that demonstration there was obviously the PRS SE was way hotter than the PRS LT pickups in the wood library. Now the pickups fundamentally are exactly the same, but the ones in the American factory have got the higher quality wiring and they're not as hot compared to these PRSs. Now I, once again, prefer how hot the PRS pickups are. They're just screaming. You literally plug the guitar in, and I found it so inspiring to play on that guitar compared to my PRS wood library. Now I have to be careful throughout this entire comparison video that I'm not favoring the PRS SE too much because it's the new and shiny guitar here in the studio and I'm just really enjoying playing it because it's new. I am really being strict on my opinion as to how I actually feel about how the guitar plays compared to its more expensive big brother, or whatever you want to call it. Now, when we take a listen to the PRS SE hollow body, you can hear that the pickups just have so much more bite. They're just more treble, more clarity, and they cut more in the mix, which is super useful when you are once again in a full band situation. The electric guitar is going to be very prominent inside of the performance. However, from my experience with the PRS wood library, and also from the demonstration, you can hear what I'm talking about. There's just so much thickness to its sound, which sounds amazing in isolation, but as soon as you start encompassing this within drums, bass, another guitar part, vocals, it totally just gets lost, because the fundamental guitar just doesn't have that bite and that cut compared to other pickups available inside of a PRS. Now, for the third and final test, we are going to be running both guitars straight into the front of my Blackstar 40-watt amp. And we're going to be using the onboard overdrive inside of this amplifier. This will give you a bit of an indication of how these guitars can perform in a super high gain situation. So we're going to be running quite a rocky / heavy rock metal type tone. Now, one of my very first observations of running this PRS through the Blackstar is the fact this PRS has a much tighter overdrive sound. And this is probably because this is a solid body. However, on the other PRS SE, that is a hollow body, so there's a lot more acoustic sound flying around inside of the body, which probably makes it sound a little bit looser. Now, I do prefer the tightness of the sound coming out of this PRS. It's very chunky and very chuggy. But the problem is, I struggle to get this PRS to bite because I have to crank up the overdrive on the amp to compensate for the fact that these pickups aren't very hot. However, on the SE, the pickups are a lot hotter, so this pushes the amp more. So then in turn, I can actually reduce the overdrive on the amp, and then this reduces the compression, which then results in a more dynamic sound coming out of the guitar. Now, when it comes to rolling off the volume, the PRS Wood Library has way more fidelity and dynamic range. It sounds brilliant. You can roll basically virtually down to a crystal clear, clean tone, all the way up to a filthy, dirty tone. However, on the SE, you roll back to about 3 or 4, and it's still got quite a lot of bite to its actual tone. And then on top of that, you don't even have the option to coil tap to reduce the gain even further on the pickups, whereas on the Wood Library, we can clean it up in humbucker mode, and then we can coil tap to go even thinner and even cleaner one step further when you run less hot pickups in the single coil mode. With that said though, however, the PRS SE did retain its volume better when rolling back. So on the PRS Wood Library, I found myself rolling back to a beautiful clean tone, but this was considerably quieter to the actual hot overdriven tone. Now, obviously this has come to be expected because we're turning the volume down, but on the SE, although I would turn the volume down, it would reduce the gain on the pickups, but it would still retain a level of dynamics, so it was comparable to when the pickups were at 10. So this basically meant I could be rocking all out in the chorus, pickups on full, then turn it back to about 5 or 6 for the verse, and it would be quite comparable on a audio level. So it wouldn't be too obvious that I'd roll back and you can no longer hear the guitar inside of the performance. Whereas with the Wood Library, I found myself rolling back to about 5 or 6, and the dip from 10 would just be huge, to a point where it would just be kind of inaudible because the actual level of the guitar has dropped considerably compared to where it was previously at. So the SE does perform better on kind of retaining a volume level, but still cleaning up. But then again, the Wood Library has more dynamic range. Now, to conclude, I personally think you should purchase a PRS SE guitar. They are way better value for money compared to the other PRSs. Yes, they may not look as pretty because they don't have the flame maple tops. They sometimes don't even have 100% maple. You know, it's the veneer laminate version of maple. The wood specs aren't as high as the more premium guitars. You also have nickel finishes on a majority of them on the bridge and the tuner heads and pickups, you know, whereas on the Wood Libraries you can get gold finish, which looks a lot nicer. But at the end of the day, the core fundamentals of the guitars are identical. They both play brilliant, and they hardly feel different between the two of them from a player's perspective. Now, I talked about some of the awesome specs on my Wood Library, like for example, the floating trem for a tremolo whammy bar, if that's something you're interested in. Well, you can get the exact same spec tremolo bar on an SE PRS. They're identical. There's no difference between the Wood Library one or the one you get on the SE model. Another thing I talked about on the Wood Library, which I really liked, was the positioning of the volume and tone knobs. Really convenient when you're picking on the strings. Well, you can even get PRS SE guitars that have that exact same layout as my Wood Library. And also, I talked about how my Wood Library had a coil tap on the tone knob, so I could coil tap and I'd have single coils as well as humbuckers. Well, there are even SE model PRSs that have that exact same feature as well. So at the end of the day, you're not really paying for anything different features-wise on the guitar other than just basically vanity of how pretty it looks or how fancy it is, so you can tell other guitarists what type of spec would. But as you can tell from the demos in today's video, this sounds better in some situations than the better spec Wood Library, the better, more expensive pickups, and the better American wiring. This actually holds its own. Now, what you do get for your money with a PRS Wood Library and a high-spec PRS is the fact, like we say, the top is solid maple. And because it's solid maple, this means they have carved the body of the guitar. It's got some beautiful lines all the way along the body because they've absolutely carved it out to perfection. The craftsmanship in this guitar is beautiful. Now, obviously, we don't get this with the laminate. It's a much more basic curve because of the cutbacks to make the guitar cheaper. So from an aesthetics point of view, the lines are absolutely beautiful. Now, one thing I would say is also considerably more beneficial from buying the more expensive guitar is the input jack over here. This input jack is way more reliable than the one on the SE. It just screams quality. It's got the gold connectors. It's very high quality input jack. I'm confident every time I take this guitar out with me, I'm not going to get any issues actually plugging the guitar jack in. Now, on the subject of the input jack on the SE, Now, obviously we have two because this is a piezo guitar, but what I noticed was when I was actually doing the demonstrations for this guitar, when I was plugging in the guitar jack for the magnetic pickups, it was kind of catching a little bit, and I thought maybe my guitar lead was bent or something weird, so I changed guitar leads, and it was still catching a little bit, but it fit better, so maybe there was something with the cable. But when I did look at the actual input, there was a little bit of just something was not fully lined up with the actual hole, which I thought was causing the actual catching on the guitar. But overall, it's still a beautiful guitar and it performs well, but that was just something pretty minor I had noticed. Another difference with the SE and the Wood Library is the actual straps, pegs on the side of the guitar. So you can see here we just have a very standard looking strap that you would put on. Now I actually prefer the ones that come on the SE, and I'm going to tell you why right now. On the PRS Wood Library, it comes with these super thick and fat strap pegs. And now I get the theory behind it is basically they're that thick that once the strap's around them, it's then not going to pop off because it's got such a huge circumference. But the problem is actually getting the strap on. Because they have such a large circumference, it makes it virtually impossible to get the strap on. So then by the time you get the strap on, it's then like stretched out of shape. So then it just pops off all the time because you can never fully get it on because it's so difficult to stretch it around the thing. The amount of times I was rocking a strap on my expensive PRS and it would pop off because I couldn't fully get it around the thing, around the actual strap peg. Total nightmare. So what I did instead was I switched out the straps for strap locks. You know, I've got some strap locks on this PRS right here, which I thought was a shame considering, you know, I spent like almost £4,000 on this guitar to then have to go and spend like 15, 20 pounds on some strap locks because the provided strap pegs couldn't hold the strap. Was a little bit disappointing. It was very frustrating. I didn't really want to modify the guitar. Now, if you are a working musician like myself, you do gigs, maybe do session work, something like that, then I would say buy the SE. Now, yes, the Wood Library would look fancy. You were racking up at the studio and people go, wow, your guitar's so sexy. That is cool. But from a personal point of view, because I take this everywhere, like across wherever I'm playing, it gets beaten up. If you can see in the light, the back of this guitar is so scratched, it's unreal, you know, with the stuff I wear on stage, you know, shirt or a leather jacket or a blazer, whatever situation I'm playing in. It's totally destroyed the back of the beautiful guitar. My watch is marked down here. Even something else, I think something on my wrist must have marked and chipped the back of the neck over here. Totally devastating because the guitar is so expensive. To mark anything on it, you're like absolutely heartbroken. Whereas obviously the SEs are more orientated around either beginner players or working musicians. So it means you can use and abuse the guitar for 3-4 years and not really care because you're getting paid to use and abuse it, as opposed to getting paid to devalue this one because it's so expensive. So if you're a working musician, definitely just pick up an SE because they are a workhorse, pretty much identical spec. If it gets broken, it gets scratched, or if it gets stolen, you're going to be less heartbroken to say goodbye to this as opposed to saying goodbye to this. So if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know in the comment section down below which PRS would you buy, or which PRS have you bought? Do you have a fancier one or do you just run an SE? I'd be really interested to see what everyone's thoughts are on this topic in the comment section down below. But do definitely turn the notification bell to on when you're subscribing to the channel, because I've got a full review on the way of this brand new PRS SE Hollow Body 2 Piezo Edition. I'm really impressed with the guitar so far. I've wanted to have a piezo guitar for a very long time, and PRS actually finally made this happen in a consumer-friendly model. But as always, thank you so much for watching. I've been Ben Rowlands, and I will see you in the next one.